Okay, so I believe we should be finally live. We had some just technicalities and technical problems. Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, fellow delegates. I'm very happy of being here. My name is Alessandro Di Maiuta, and I'm the General Director for the Change the World Academy and Associazioni Diplomatici. I'm very happy and pleased of opening this Change the World Mastery alongside with a couple of colleagues that are connected here, and especially a guest that is going to give us a very interesting insight on how geopolitics are currently going, which is kind of a strange moment because diplomacy has changed quite a lot in the last few months. But said this, I just wanted to be here to welcome you all to in this conference. In a couple of weeks, we're all going to be in New York. Exactly in 14 days, the conference should start in New York. So I really hope that you're ready, prepared, and ready to embrace a bit the atmosphere of the Change the World MUN. I say this many times, the Change the World is much more than just a model UN conference in which you'll be participating. You're really coming from all the corners of the world, and you are going to feel throughout those 4 days the magic behind the Change the World MUN, the relations that you're going to create, the friendship, the diplomacy, the negotiation that is going to be going. Is going to be a lifetime experience. So without any further ado, I just want to welcome you once again here and thank you for giving us this opportunity of organizing this conference. And I'll pass on immediately the floor to my dear colleague, Alice Corbino, our Chief of DICE. Alice, you have the floor, and then we can start with the mastery. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Alessandro. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be here for this first session of the Mastery event. As Alessandro has already said, we have a special moment today here with us. We have a very important guest, a guest speaker that will give us a little bit of insights and an analysis of what's currently going on. I think it would be very interesting. So if you have any questions or ideas, in the meantime, please write them in the chat, and at the end we will try to answer a couple of them. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Giorgio Cuscito. He's a geopolitical analyst specializing in China and Indo-Pacific affairs, and he's also a member of the editorial board of Limits, where he coordinates the Indo-Pacific section. So Giorgio, thank you very much for being here with us.
Thank you, Alice. Thank you, Alessandro. Again, thank you for your kind invitation. It is a privilege joining this meeting, and then, of course, I will join you also in New York for a wonderful experience, I would say, and in a very complicated moment for the international relations, diplomacy, and geopolitics. The world is experiencing a phase, a moment of dramatic changes, and that has not been seen for years, for decades. It is true that our world is consistently marked by crises, wars, and so on, but today there are crises that will change drastically the relationships between great powers and therefore the global balance and the world order, I would say, with consequences, of course, not just on international relations, but also on our lives. So that's the reason why it is important to study better what is going on all around the world, and we can identify 3 crucial geopolitical theaters in that sense. I would like to share with you some map made by Limes. Just a sec. Okay, here we are. So we are now in I don't know if you can see the first map.
Yes.
Okay. So we are now in as a map, as the title says, we are in a whole different world, because if we think about 10 years ago, the world was really different from the one of today. And we are looking at three main crises. The first one, and probably the most important now, is of course the Russia, the war between, I would say, the proxy war between Russia and the US in Ukraine. So very, very close to the European heartland, so the heart of Europe. The other crisis is the one in the Middle East. So the first crisis is in Ukraine, where the invasion of Russia and the resistance of Kiev have been underway for 3 years. And resistance which is in one way or another supported by Western countries. The second one is the second crisis is in the Middle East, where the theater is centered on today on a specific triangle between Israel, Iran, and Turkey, which are the most important geopolitical powers in this theater. Followed, of course, immediately after by other countries, such as Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates. By the way, these countries are growing a lot also in the AI, artificial intelligence sector, which is quite interesting. Maybe we can discuss about this later. And then, of course, one of the hot topic here is the war in Gaza and the geopolitical role and future of Israel, with, of course, consequences on the rest of the Middle East. And as you can see, there is a connection between the first theater, Ukraine, and the Middle East, especially because the countries involved are connected with each other. I mean that, for example, Israel and the US have a historical relation. They are, I would say, we can call them twins in one way or another. It means that the US is one of the strongest partner of Israel in history. And by the way, Israel has also a very close relation with Russia. So maybe we can talk about this later, but considering what is happening now in Ukraine and the attempt by Trump's administration of dealing with Russia, I think that Israel, the role of Israel maybe is also another issue that Washington and Moscow may face in the short term. And then there is another theater, the third one, which is the Indo-Pacific, where the United States and China are facing each other directly, especially in the South China Sea and around Taiwan. Besides, here we have also other major powers like Japan, which is probably the most important geopolitical rival from the Chinese perspective. Is a rising power, which is investing a lot in military and in technology. And we can say that Indo-Pacific is probably, in the long term, the most important theater for the geopolitical balances and the world order, because here we have the two most important geopolitical actors worldwide facing each other. But anyway, at the moment, it seems like Washington and Beijing don't want to get to the real clash, and maybe I will explain also why. The factor that most affects these dynamics is the change in US geopolitical priorities with the beginning of the second Trump administration. As a matter of fact, Washington wants to change its trajectory, compared to the previous administration, its priorities, because the plan seems to be the following. Finding an agreement with Russia on Ukraine, so meaning, first of all, reaching a ceasefire in Ukraine. After that, opening a dialogue with Russia, and at the same time, leave to the European countries a very important commitment. Prepare themselves to face Russia in Europe. For example, one of the most important debates now in Europe is how to, first of all, how to deploy peacekeeping soldiers and troops in Ukraine, and after that, the other issue is the military balance. So how to raise the military balance to defend better Europe and so on. So leaving to the European countries this commitment, taking care of Russia. The other point is, according to Trump's administration today, is the other point is stabilizing the Middle East. So finding a way to make Israel and the other major powers, first of all Iran or Turkey, coexist. It is very difficult. And for example, the Abraham Accord, so the pact that Trump during the first administration promoted in order to find a compromise between Israel and the Arab countries was, and I think is, a way to counterbalance Iran's role in the Middle East. So let's see what will happen in this sense. And I would add that point here is not just what the Arab countries want to do in future, but the point is the identity of Israel. So what future Israel is planning for itself, because at the moment it seems that Israel lacks a clear strategy in the long term, because facing each rival in the Middle East, such as Iran, but not only, facing terrorism, Hamas, and the so-called Iranian proxies like Houthi and others, all at the same time, is not a strategy. Is a permanent war, and this cannot be a solution. And the final target is, of course, taking care of China. So leaving to Europe the other activities in the western part of Eurasia, and taking care of Chinese, the containment of China, which is considered by the US in one way or another the primary threat, the most important threat to the US security from an economic, military, and technological perspective. So in pursuing this approach, Trump aims to increase tariffs against allies and rivals, friends and foes, also to promote the US economic growth, and therefore to gain the consensus of the population. So the so-called America First means that Trump wants to answer to some specific American requests. And for example, the Americans are not so much interested anymore in making wars abroad like in the past. And because they remember very well what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan and so on. And I can show you also some interesting chart in that sense. Just take a look to the recruitment crisis in the US. This chart is very interesting to me. So it means that there is a lack of trust in the institutions, not so much in the armed forces, but the point is, I don't want to join the army because I don't want to make war anymore. So Trump understood this dynamic inside the US, And the crisis, the American crisis, it is an identity crisis, because the US needs to be an empire in order to preserve its hegemony. An empire, when I talk about an empire, I mean that one of the most important priority for the US is to prevent other major powers from rising in Eurasia, controlling Eurasia, and then one day threatening US security in the American continent. So this is a priority from the strategic point of view, but at the same time, the US, the United States are not just an empire, they are also a nation with an identity and with social and economic issues. So the point for Washington is to find a balance between them. But in pursuing this achievement, Trump is changing the status quo. And this is the reason why now there is a big debate, not just in the US, but also in Europe, about our future. So this map is quite interesting, how America wants to win. So preserving some great powers from rising in Eurasia, especially Russian Federation and China. They are considered the most relevant threats in this context. And especially because now Russia and China are closer than ever, especially after the beginning of Ukraine war and after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, of course. And Russia is now reliant on energy exports to China. Just think about oil and gas. So in this specific moment, China is keeping Russia close to itself, and at the same time is also penetrating in some specific theater, which is considered from Russia as part of its sphere of influence, such as Central Asia and Arctic, which will be one of the most important geopolitical theater for US-China-Russia triangle. So the reason why probably Trump wants to achieve the ceasefire in Ukraine and open the dialogue with Russia is that one day wants to not to break the relation between Russia and China, but at least make this relation much more unstable, and consider that today China and Russia are not allies. They are partners, but they don't trust each other in terms of strategic interests. And also remember that they were also rivals in the past. Russia took a lot of territories from China in the centuries. If you know Vladivostok, which is a Russian city on the eastern flank, on the eastern coast of Russia, once was a Chinese city, for example, just to make you an example. So, of course, now Beijing and Moscow have a strong relation, but one of the ideas in the US is that maybe one day they can become not rivals, but less friends than now, and in this way the US containment of China can be easier, especially because one of Chinese priorities is in future to get the unification with Taiwan, which is considered by China as an essential piece in order to become a maritime power and get free access to the Pacific Ocean. And as you know, on the other side of the Pacific Ocean, there is America. So China is investing a lot in the People's Liberation Army, in dual-use technologies. Dual-use means, of course, civilian and military technology, in order to reduce the gap with the US in terms of military power and economic power. And Taiwan, by the way, is very close to China, geographically speaking, just about 100 kilometers. And of course, there is a history in common, between Taiwan and China. And we can also talk about this if you have some specific question. I'm sure that you have seen what happened in Washington some days ago, and it was a very dramatic moment for us and for diplomacy. Of course, this is not the way to make diplomacy. The discussion between Trump and Zelensky at the White House was a dramatic moment, because they should have found a way to reach the deal, to sign the deal actually, about rare earth in Ukraine, and that was considered an essential moment in order then to find a ceasefire with Russia. It didn't happen, and after that Zelensky came to Europe, and in Europe started a debate about how to deal with it. But the message from the US was very clear. The US considered the Ukraine issue a European issue. So Washington wants to reach a deal, but it doesn't want to care about what will happen later. So Europe has to take care of itself in terms of defense. Unfortunately, there is no clear strategy in that sense, because as you have seen, probably there were some meeting in Paris, then in London, but it wasn't a EU debate, it was a European debate, enlarged sometime with the UK, and then also many disagreements appeared. So it is not clear how, why, and when we can find a ceasefire with Russia in Ukraine, especially without having established a dialogue with Moscow. And by the way, Moscow wants to, first of all, to speak with the US, not with some European countries. And by the way, in Europe, in Russia and China, they recognized, they understood how EU is fragile in this moment. And this is a vulnerability for European countries. So the US plan, in order to change its priorities, is not simple at all. It is interesting that at the moment, the most dangerous issue, meaning US-China competition, is now the less dangerous. I mean that it looks like US and China wants to find some kind of deal in order to face the long-term competition, and because also they both have challenges and difficulties at home that have to be solved, both US and China. Also China, and we can talk later if you want, if you have some question, is facing many difficulties inside, and in terms of economy and social issues, the depression of the youngsters and so on. So they don't, at least now, they don't want to face a war. So in short, we are in a phase of intense change, and this can worry us, of course. However, the exercise that you will carry on in New York represents an element of hope, I would say. As you have understood, diplomacy and negotiation play a decisive role in the resolution of controversies and resolution of international disputes. So don't take Zelensky-Trump affair as an example, or at least take it as an example of we should not do to solve a problem. But the exercise, the simulation that they are going to do in New York is very useful, because you will understand how to negotiate, how to find a compromise. And this is crucial for preventing the worst case scenarios in real life, not just in the daily life, but also in geopolitics. So I encourage you to face this simulation with the maximum with a proactive attitude, not only because it will be useful for you in everyday life, but also because maybe one day you could find yourself being part of these huge geopolitical challenges. So enjoy the simulation that they are going to experience, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. I believe if you have a couple of minutes, we have some questions in the chat. Thank you if you're willing to answer. So the first one is very interesting. Is, given the current geopolitical tensions, how effective do you think the United Nations is in preventing or mitigating conflicts, especially when major powers like the US are threatening to leave?
Thank you for the question. UN is, of course, a very relevant platform in order to debate and discuss, but of course, the real actors in the UN, as in any other international organizations, are the states. So they are the major actors in that sense. And when in the moments of instabilities, of course, each state wants to carry on its own interests, its strategic interests. So now we are facing a moment in which everyone wants to pursue and reach its target. Unfortunately, for example, and take a look at what is going on in the EU, now we are understanding very strongly that, for example, Italy or France or Germany or Poland or other countries look at the war in a different way. So, for example, if you take for example, Poland perspective, Poland, historically speaking, lives the relation with Russia in a very different way compared to, for example, Italy. Poland is ready for fighting a war since many years, psychologically speaking. And this is important from the perspective of the population. So I think that now also UN is facing some challenge in terms of responsibility and in terms of role. And because considering the importance of this platform, of course, actors such as Russia, China wants to also put forward its targets inside the UN. And so let's see what happens. But we have to consider the UN as a space of dialogue, of diplomacy, and, if possible, of compromise. Of course, compromise means that when you want to deal and reach a deal with someone else, you have to leave something. You cannot just ask the other to drop everything. You have to leave something, and you have to be prepared for it in advance. So that means diplomacy, asking and giving.
Thank you. One last question, which also contains a comment. The European Union's future seems very black. Do you think the European Union will turn around the situation and try to stabilize and reinforce the Union itself, or will we see the downfall of the European Union?
It's a very tough question, I would say, because sometimes, especially in Europe, we think that the EU is a geopolitical actor, which is, at least by my perspective, which is not, because it lacks an identity. Because inside the EU we have many identities, many cultures, many ways of looking at war, so now we are looking at what are the vulnerabilities of the European Union. This is a crucial moment. This can be the moment in order to shape a new kind of identity, but in order to do it, we should recognize which are our vulnerabilities. Because if we just think about we have to improve the military balance, we have to raise the military balance, we have to create the so-called European armed forces, we are looking at one specific problem, but we are lacking the strategic trajectory of Europe. So, for example, if we think about the nuclear issue, Macron offered to the rest of the European countries to protect Europe with the so-called nuclear umbrella. So it means that it's France to decide, in that case, France should decide whether to use the atomic bomb or not. But it's France to decide. So this is just one of the examples. But France decides first of all in its own interest, which is quite normal from a geopolitical point of view. And France's strategic targets are not the same of I don't know, Croatia or Greece or Spain. So the point is, to me, is to find a way to be much more responsible against the threats on the eastern flank of Europe, and at the same time, without forgetting that we have a very important relation with the US. And in Europe, we have NATO military bases and US military bases. Germany and Italy are the countries with the largest number of US and NATO military bases. And the reason is very simple, because Italy and Germany lost the Second World War. So when we talk about the European armed forces, we should also think that maybe it's not in the best interest of the US, and it can be an issue for us because we have a very strong relation with Washington. So we should find a balance between being much more responsible and find a compromise with the US. For example, I just make an example about Italy. Italy can be much more responsible in terms of maritime security in the Mediterranean Sea. It can do it in its own interest in order to prevent threats rising in the Mediterranean Sea coming from, for example, from Africa and also from the Middle East. By the way, for the Mediterranean countries, keeping the Mediterranean Sea open is crucial, because we rely on exports and imports. So in that sense, we can find a match between our strategic interest, preventing threats in the Mediterranean Sea, and at the same time doing the interests of the US in preventing threats that one day may put in danger the US security. So this is a way to find a compromise. I would add that in order to make diplomacy and negotiate with other countries, is essential to study the other's perspective. So we should study how, for example, China or US or Russia negotiate, their behavior and their culture, not to share and to accept what the way they think or act, but just to know how they deal with those issues, because this is the only way to prevent threats and understand how to find a compromise. Because if I understand what the other wants from me, I can make a deal. Otherwise, it's possible.
Thank you. One last question that just came in the chat, and it's also a bit controversial. Do you consider Taiwan to be a sovereign state? And if China tried to integrate Taiwan with military forces, would that represent an attack on a sovereign state by China?
This is a very interesting question. Taiwan is independent de facto. As a matter of fact, it has its own government, the population vote, it has a democratic system, it has armed forces, and it interacts with the rest of the other countries all around the world. At the same time, in terms of international law, just few countries recognize Taiwan. I think 12 countries in the world, including also the Holy See, so the Vatican. The only one country in Europe, by the way. But I think that it doesn't matter in the end if, from a diplomatic perspective, Taiwan is considered or not as independent. Because just think about the US. For example, it's true that Washington doesn't recognize Taiwan, as an independent state, but at the same time is supporting it, for example, training also Taiwanese armed forces. So the US are supporting Taiwan. I think that China, in long term, China doesn't want to get the unification by force. I mean that it's not the first. Is not a priority. I mean that China would like to get the unification without the using of force and persuading the population to accept the unification, the Taiwanese population. I mean, but it's very difficult right now because Taiwan is really like the status quo. So this is the reason why, for example, China is trying to isolate Taiwan diplomatically speaking. So the question is right because China is trying to isolate Taiwan in terms of diplomacy. But I think that in the end, if if we get to the point that China is going to invade Taiwan, I don't think that the diplomatic status will matter so much because I think that, for example, US would defend Taiwan in one way or another. But there is a debate about this because we cannot exclude that in next years China will try to find a compromise with the US about Taiwan and try to divide the world in so-called sphere of influence. I mean, just look what Trump said about Greenland and Panama. He said we have to expel, I would say, China from Panama and from the Arctic. So it seems like crazy Trump when says something like that, but behind there is also some kind of strategic thinking because it's like Washington wants to define again its strategic priorities and better protecting the territories closer to US borders. So Washington knows very well that Arctic is a hot topic and that China and Russia are getting together in the Arctic, closer to Europe and the US. But in this way, considering that Arctic and Panama are not, from the Chinese perspective, two priorities, if Trump puts its attention on these two theaters, it can be the solution in order to give to China a way to have its sphere of influence in the Indo-Pacific. So this is the way that that China is looking at this issue. Probably Beijing will try to ask to say, look, Trump, I put it simply, of course, look, Trump, leave us taking care of our interest in the South China Sea and in Taiwan, and basically leave us some geopolitical space. Because as you know, in Japan, South Korea, Philippines, Singapore, in these countries, US have lots of military bases. So the Chinese feel the pressure of the US in the Indo-Pacific. So who knows? I don't know actually, but we cannot exclude that from here to 2027, or I don't know, China and the US will reach also the moment of getting face to face in the Indo-Pacific. I really hope not. And this is the reason why also negotiation is important, because US and China don't know each other very well and don't understand each other very well, although they have the tools to understand each other. But it is very hard now to put yourself in others' shoes, and this is why it is very important for us, and especially for you, that you are very young, younger than me, and that you will have to face these challenges in the next future.
Thank you very much. This, I think, concludes our panel, and I thank you again very much for your presence and for your very interesting presentation. We will see also Mr. Giorgio Cuscito in New York with us, so thank you so much. Looking forward to it. See you soon. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much, and see you in New York.
Delegates, so I'd like to leave the floor to Director for a final remarks, and so that he can say goodbye to you and good luck for this for the start of this mastery event, and then we will just give you a little bit of notes and suggestions so that you can start going into your Zoom rooms. You're going to be divided into teams, as you know, to start with this first day of challenges.
Grazie, Alicia. I was not expecting this. It was just to obviously thank you and thank Giorgio, because I followed a bit of comments. There were more than 1,300 students connected, and they have got so many questions. So Giorgio, expect that you'll be like assalito in New York with questions, but it was very interesting, and especially because we are living in a strange period. So thank you so much, and thank you to all the students that came connected today from all over the world. And said this, Sally, I think we can move to giving some information about the work of this afternoon, and we can free Giorgio in his thousands of activities. Thank you so much to both of you.
Thank you. Delegates, so it is now time to start with the actual activity of this first challenge day. So as you know, you have received a Zoom link from your host of today's meeting. Or from your advisors. So please start going to your Zoom rooms for this first mastery day. Remember not to share this link with anyone, as they might have a different link. And remember also that tomorrow we will have the second day of this mastery event, which is the mock session. You will receive the link to join your mock session today. It's going to be a different link than the one that you will be using to join the challenges. So just keep that in mind. I wish you good luck. And I will see you soon. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.